my god. Oh my god, people. I can't believe it. Fuck, am I triggered, man? Nothing on my face today, fuck. Doesn't make videos and shit on my face. Well, I just woke up. It's been a rough week. I think it's a lack of sun, and it's just so wet. The job is actually more fun, and life is more fun when it's freezing outside than when it's actually getting warmer and wet and humid. I remember from previous winters, it's actually March and April that kind of suck. You know, showers, rainy. Anyways, I woke up today, had a whole bunch of topics to talk about, and I opened the news, which I never should do, and another comedian like my brother died. Same family, Just for Laughs group. My brother was part of Just for Laughs. It's a comedy troupe that there's festivals around the world. And this guy committed suicide. I never heard of him. Brody Stevens. Apparently, he was he's a famous guy. But I wake up and I go, Just for Laughs, comedy world. Just for Laughs, comedy world remembers Brody Stevens. I remember exactly that. Just for Laughs, comedy world remembers my brother. Says Brody Stevens was one of the funniest comedians we've ever had the honor of working with us. Thank you for making us laugh. We'll miss you. You know, that's exactly the kind of platitudes they gave my brother. I went to a show in memory of my brother. It was like 2 hours, and I gotta say it was one of the worst experiences of my life. Um, that really was one of my points of breakdown. I'm just gonna recall my memories now because I'm triggered back to that time. Really, when my brother died, I wasn't traumatized when it first happened. It just was so unreal. It just made me very sad. But I didn't feel any sense of trauma. So I had that up to that point, I didn't know anything was really disturbed within my family. Beyond I didn't know anything. I didn't know my parents were sociopaths and psychopaths. I didn't know they were sick people. And my brother, when he had told me about the molestation the night before, it had slipped my mind when he died. I wasn't thinking about that anymore. I didn't think about it until, like much later, 10 months later, just when I went on YouTube for the first time and recorded a video out in it. Anyways, but what happened was that, I don't even know when it was. Let me check. It was when Robin Williams died. That, let's see how much later it was than my brother. My brother died in 2011, at the end, November 16th, and Robin Williams died in 2014, August 11th. So it was basically 11 to 12 to 11 to 12. It was 3 years later to 12 to 13. That was 3 years after my brother died. Yeah, that's right, 2014. And then I went no contact. 2015 is when I started my channel, I believe, in the park. Anyway, so in 2014, Robin Williams dies, and I was very depressed, especially because he committed suicide. He was young, and my brother and I grew up watching Robin Williams. Robin Williams was my brother's first comedian that he really liked. We used to watch Mork and Mindy as little kids. That was like, Mork and Mindy was the last time I can remember my brother and I being a family happy. It must have been around that time my father got caught molesting my brother or somebody. Anyway, so I called my parents and I brought up Robin Williams, and I was depressed, and there was just almost like the comedians. There was just no reaction. There was no emotional depth. Um, just to say something about that show, it was memory from my brother. I got to thinking, realizing there that the entire industry is narcissistic. There was no emotions there. I can tell they were all just competitive, and it was just another comedian that they didn't have to deal with as competition. Or it could just be that they've seen so many of their friends die. I mean, I'm going to tell you something. It's a dangerous job. I'm going to do a whole video on it on my other channel. It's a major issue. I've seen knowing them, you know, I didn't know them personally through anyone. I knew them through my brother, but through my brother, the people who I knew who have died in that career probably been 20, and I'm only 50, and that's 20, younger than my brother. They died in all kinds of ways: suicide, homicide, accidents on the road. Anyways, so that's when my depression. I'm just gonna check one. I don't want to check. I don't want to check. It was around 2014. My parents had no reaction. It's like they did not see the connection of sadness between. I can just tell that there was just nothing. There was nothing going on with my parents. And then my cousin died. I think 2 months later. At 30. I don't know how old she was. She was 40 or something. I told you she died suddenly, just like my brother. She got a massage. She got paralyzed because apparently there was a tumor in her back since she was young, and when she got massaged, it moved it or something. She ended up paralyzed, and she died within a few months in the hospital from an infection that she couldn't battle. And that was a girl who told me just a year before, or a few years before, that at my brother's funeral, that these things happen, you never know. And then she died the next. Anyways, and with that girl too, I was so sad after it was Robin Williams, and then my cousin. That's not even my cousin who died last year in the motorcycle accident, but. And my parents had absolutely no reaction. They had no reaction to my brother's death. They had no reaction to my. Well, I guess if they had no reaction to my brother's death, why would they have a reaction to Robin Williams or my cousin, right? Anyways, so I checked this guy Brody Stevens out, and sure enough, he's Jewish. Suicide. Now, I don't want to criticize one religion after the other, but I can tell you something. If there's anything I can tell you, is that I'll say one thing about culture and narcissism. Christians are less narcissistic. That's all I'm going to tell you than a lot of the other religions. Hindus are not narcissistic. I mean, some Christians are obviously narcissistic if they're in politics. Yes, we understand that from American politics, but the religion itself is not based on a sense of entitlement and being chosen, or being, like the Muslims, they're in a battle for their existence. The Jews are in a battle for their existence, and I guess that makes people defensive. I don't know, whatever it is. I was not surprised to find that he was Jewish. A lot of victims of narcissism, I find, have been Jewish. Just a shame that we couldn't, that we couldn't save this guy. One of my channels on my new site is going to be for comedians, or not just comedians, but show business people, because they seem to just, obviously they have a need for attention to begin with, and unfortunately, within that career, as you get older, 9 times out of 10, you become less famous. Even if you were on top of the world. Look at someone like Eminem, for example. There was a guy who was biggest star in the world. Today he could probably walk down the street and very few people would recognize him. Axl Rose, same thing. I mean, especially music. And anyways, I'm just rambling. But look, I've been depressed. Not just because, for a few reasons. Mostly it's the weather. But I made a list of things the other day. I was thinking about I was writing my book, So I write these. Oh, listen to this. I know I'm rambling. It's gonna be a rambling one, guys. Remember I told you I went to the cops about my father being a potential suspect in the disappearance of that little black boy who was missing over the summer? And they came back and they did luminol on my window at my back of my apartment to see if I was a suspect. Well, they didn't find the kid. He's probably in the water. But listen to this. I have a friend, a girl in the neighborhood, a girl who I should really date. If I wasn't borderline, I would try to date her because she has her issues, but she's a good woman. I guess that's the problem with me. It's like I guess it's when I see a good woman, I want to keep them as a friend in a way. I'm afraid to ruin the whole thing. She actually went down to the cops also. This is how I know she's good for me. She loves animals. She's always walking six dogs. She has rabbits and all kinds of stuff. She's a good chick. Um, she had a dream. She had a premonition dream about the boy and how he died. I don't think it was about. She didn't see a crime. She saw an accident. She thought she saw him go in the water in her dream, and she actually went down there to the scene of the crime where they had a command post. And she actually told them, "I had a dream," and they actually took her in and interviewed her for an hour about her dream. And I guess I was thinking, yeah, because they don't know. They always do that. They probably have her as a suspect too. She doesn't realize that. They probably investigated her the second she left. Anyways, just goes to show you how two interesting things I thought of that. One is how compassionate, empathic people get dragged in, whether we want to or whether we don't. And I thought I was one of the few people to go in. I bet you there were thousands of people who went in. And the most important thing is that's where it gets interesting. If she could think that her dream was real, that leads me to think that I was also imagining things in it. The chances was my father had nothing to do with it. And that what happens is that the media almost creates an urgency to come up with a solution, and our minds just work unconsciously over time, and they start feeding our consciousness with potentials. And when we get fed these potentials, since we don't have a lot of data to work with, I mean, in that case, we had no data really. The kid was disappeared in a park in the middle of the winter near the water. That's how we knew. So when you get these potential ideas from your unconscious and then you can't verify them. See, with my parents, I got these potentials and then I was able to verify and find out which ones were true, which ones were not. Well, then you're left really in a very uncomfortable position. You're holding on to a piece of data and your mind feels it could be the answer. And it's very hard to just forget about it. I think for certain people. For me, I couldn't. I'm so glad I went down and gave my report about my father because I couldn't sleep. And she told me the same thing. She couldn't relax till she went down. It's very interesting. Oh yeah, and I wrote here also that when they luminoed my apartment, it was actually a good sign. I look back at it now and I think, okay, it means my father was not a strong enough suspect, and I was at least as good as a suspect, which leads me to hopefully think that my father's crimes were of a more, I don't want to say loving nature, but when I researched pedophilia, I found there was two kinds of pedophiles: the sadistic and the ones who were just who thought they were loving the children. They didn't know how to express. And my father does not know how to express. He's a psychopath. He doesn't have the words. He doesn't have the I believe my father has the emotional depth, but does not have the ability to express it. Because I think he's tried to express things, and it just comes out flat. And my mother, when I think about it, she just didn't have it. She didn't have any of that emotional depth. She couldn't see beauty in things. She couldn't see. She could see cuteness, I guess. Anyways, I don't know. But I thought, I don't know. See, that's why I wish I wish they had told me more, because I don't know my father's crimes. Oh, but I looked up I did some more research on my psychologist, the child psychologist who works at the university. And I did this 2 nights ago, and I found out he's actually not a psychiatrist that was working with my school, like my parents told me. He's a psychiatrist who works with the courts. So he was obviously, it was a court order. My father got arrested, and there was a court order to interview me. He's a forensic psychiatrist, and he appears in a lot of child alienation cases, parental alienation, child abduction, that kind of thing. So I do believe I have the legal right to find out everything he knows about me now, even though I was a minor at the time. And I'm going to ask him. I'm going to ask him when the weather is good enough and I'm feeling like walking down to the campus and hanging out till I can accost him. Anyways, I'm so curious what he can tell me. He really is the lynch key. And I should probably go over and ask him immediately before something might happen. So God forbid he dies. I mean, he's quite young. I thought he was an old man, right? I was 7 years old, and the guy seems so old. He had a wife and a house, and now I look at him and I'm like, what? He's like, what? I'm 48. He looks like he's maybe 65, 63. He must have been a very young man. Like he must have been maybe 22, 23, 24, 25 at the time. And I was 7. 18 years, 48, 50. Yeah, he's about 65. I couldn't believe it. I didn't even think he'd be alive anymore. I'm like, my God, he's still young, teaching and practicing and appearing in court cases. For me, it's a whole lifetime ago. It was a lifetime that was a race. I had forgotten about him completely. Anyways, man. I have all these. Oh my God. Something else I remembered. I spent the whole night. I didn't sleep 2 days, and I have a list here of things I remembered that night. That's just from that night. I'm only on number 3. This is disgusting, people. There's a group called NAMBLA, North American Man Love Boy Association. Now, I'm pretty sure my father was part of that, because my brother made references to that when we were very young. I mean, not kids, but I think I was like 18 or 19 or 20, and he's joking about NAMBLA. Now, he was a comedian. No, he used to watch comedy, so there's a chance he picked it up there, but he knew exactly what it stood for. I had never heard of it, and he seemed to like actually understand it. I don't know. And that would make sense when my father was always traveling. And it would also make sense why they didn't think he was a suspect in the murder, because men who are part of NAMBLA, I suppose, are not sadistic. They actually are like more like the old Greeks who think men and boys should be, for some reason, sexually. I don't understand it. One day I'll research the Greek culture, because maybe they can make me comfortable with the whole concept, and. But I don't know. You see, and that's one of the things. I know exactly what my mother's all about. I know how her narcissism works. I pretty much know exactly how sociopathic she is. My father, I just don't know. Oh man, I don't want to read all these things. This is going to be another video. This is all the games they played on me and all the mean things they did. Oh, and all the gross things. Oh my god. I won't go into this in this video, people. I just wanted to record it in memory of my brother, man. You know. Could I just check one last? You know, I don't do it now. I wanted to know when my cousin died. Decide to see if it was before or after. I'm gonna find that out right now, if you don't mind. So, I want to explain to you how trauma works. Let me see if I can remember her name. See, my mind is actually plays blanks on me these days. Instead of being depressed, I can't remember anything. I won't even try it. You know that. It was around the same time. So here's what I think happens with trauma, because I learned that it doesn't always happen when the accident or the death occurs. It's usually afterwards. I think I know what goes on. First trauma happens, and there's a break in logic, right? Trauma is something that happens that's basically illogical. It's more like a fluke. It's a chance happening, right? There's no logic behind an accident or a brother dying or, you know, an earthquake. I mean, there's science behind it, but you can't put a logical explanation to this. You know, our socio brain that interact with people, it's like there's no human being necessarily responsible. Similar even to sociopath or psychopath, when we look, or narcissist, when we look at them, what do we say? We say, my God, they weren't even human. They were lacking humanity, you know, at the least. So we process that with that thought. Okay, this is what happened. It doesn't make sense. It's illogical. I move on. But later on, when we get traumatized, what happens is the unconscious starts to roll back its life unconsciously, starts to remember things in life to make sense of this current trauma. But it hits that first trauma and it gets stuck. And that way we can never make sense of the second trauma because our brain doesn't go back anymore, because at this point there's no logical connection. You see, I've seen it happen with me with mirrors. Like, it's a mirror of people in our past. Let's just say I almost get hit by a truck. Oh my God, there was once I was borderline and I jumped into out between two cars to cross, and I was within an inch. I had to go an inch of a car speeding by would have killed me. And I remember that was one of the times when I started to think, oh my God. And what happens unconsciously, I start thinking back to, like, my mother always told me to look both ways. There were other times I didn't look both ways and I have an accident. There were times I did look one way and there was a train. There was a time I almost got hit by this. And all these things happen on an unconscious level until it kind of reaches the beginning, and then the mind can make sense of it because it has all that information from your life. But if it's something that hits a trauma down the path, then our current understanding lacks all the previous data that we had, because it's like the search engine stops at a website that's broken. So your search results that you would normally use to make sense of it, of the current situation, are just, you only get 5 answers. So now you've got to make sense of your current situation from 5 websites where you could have had 10,000 before. And this is what I'm sure why trauma, I read many times, and people have said it, it's not when the trauma actually happens, it's when a secondary trauma happens and reminds you of that first one, and then there's a breakdown. And that was one of my big epiphanies of I was thinking, my brother died, why didn't I have that breakdown then? Why was it when Robin Williams and my cousin died? And I'm like, oh yes, because I couldn't make sense of Robin Williams and my cousin. I couldn't emotionally put it together because I had to use information from my past, but that past information was broken. When I was dealing with my brother, all my past information was intact. You see what I mean? He became that broken link of emotional logic. And that's why whenever I'm reminded of his death or something, I lose it. I mean, today this morning I broke down again because because I started to think about him and it didn't make sense. Even with everything I know, it doesn't make sense because, well, yeah, it makes sense only against the backdrop of narcissistic personality disorder, and it only makes sense against traits like shame, which I do not have. I do not have, and I guess that's really what screwed me up. Uh, I don't have a lot of shame because if there's things that I would be ashamed of, I don't do them, right? I guess that's it. Most of us are. Like I was never ashamed of smoking weed from the minute I started. I was never. See, my brother was a great. He used to tell me he wasn't addicted to weed. I go, dude, man, come on. We're addicted, dude. I used to tell him, if you don't get weed, you scream and yell, man. You'll call me from halfway across the world to send you a quarter ounce and risk your getting arrested. Come on, you're not addicted? I'm not addicted. I can stop anytime I want. I'm like, yeah, so could I. But I damn well don't. And it would be very hard to do it. The best I can ever get him to say is like, well, maybe, maybe. Come on, man. And this is narcissism. He didn't have a narcissistic personality disorder. He was able to love. He was much more borderline, but I can see where he had a lot of narcissistic traits. It could have just been that he was always triggered, because he wasn't really like that when he wasn't triggered, but he was always triggered. And I guess because he had such a more rough childhood than I, man, I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine the pain the poor guy had. Not from being molested, so much as finding out my father was molesting other boys, that my brother was not that important. I remember my father playing with my brother when I was a little tiny kid, and he wouldn't pay any attention to me. My brother and I sitting in the living room, my father playing with my brother, bouncing him and, you know, kissing him and rolling him over and me, nothing. And when I asked to be played with, he would go, "Oh, you want to be played with too? Okay." See, for him, it wasn't a child-father relationship. It was we were sex objects, and my brother was, I suppose, older. Thank God he liked the older one better, and was already completely and utterly brainwashed. I have no doubt about it. And my brother had shame in his life because he fell for it, and I didn't. Perhaps he wouldn't have had the shame if I didn't fight back. I don't know. I don't know if I was played part of it. Maybe I didn't. But the bottom line is that my brother was alone with my father, and my mother tried to give me up. Even years later, I remember her trying to hand him over to me and getting upset that I wouldn't go with him. She knew what was happening. I think she married my father knowing he was a pedophile. I mean, I don't know about that. I wish I knew. There were a few things I wish I knew. I wish I knew. Anyways, I've rambled on for long. I'm glad you guys listened. I had a lot more to say than just this, but it is unbelievable. I'll just tell you guys, since you've listened thus far, just quickly what I can remember. One comedian, my brother's friend, was found hanging in New York City in an outdoor washroom after he stabbed his wife to death. He was in his 30s. Another comedian was only in his 20s. Another Jewish guy. He was rollerblading on a country road. He was playing a tour, and he stopped in a small town with nothing to do. So he got out on his rollerblades, and he didn't realize that street would be full of trucks that would just fly at 100 miles an hour because no one was usually there, especially rollerblades. The countryside doesn't see guys on rollerblades, right? You see him on dirt bikes. So he got mowed down and killed. I don't want to think about the other ones. It's a lot of them. It was a lot of them. My stomach's grumbling. I don't know, 48 years old, my age, a Jewish guy my age committed suicide yesterday. He had everything going for him. You know, a big stardom, and here I am sitting in an apartment, you know, 12 feet by 10 feet with no family and no friends. I shouldn't say no friends. No, that's not true anymore. With no family, and no, I'm not committing suicide. That's for sure. It proves to you everything that success and finance and fame just they're not the same thing. They're not. I've had much better finances than I'm in now, and it's not the same thing as happiness. All right, guys. Thanks for watching.